Hello everybody, this is Christopher Bannon with the National News Service here in Slidell, Louisiana. And as you can see by the headline, it's definitely not a cool summer. Summer is supposed to be warm. It's the hottest time of the year for us. But has this summer been a little bit different than previous summers in recorded history? And if it has, how different has it been in some areas? So quickly, just to go over a few little topics or, just data real quick. Summer, remember, is June 1st through August 31st. As we're going to really focus in on southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi, there are only 4 official climate sites right now due to period of record and just other, statistical or more criteria met for these sites to become climate sites. But we do have records and data from a bunch of other sites. It's just going to take a few more years before they can actually become official climate sites. But the 4 that we do have are Baton Rouge, Gulfport, Macomb, and New Orleans. Today we're really going to look at Baton Rouge and New Orleans right now, especially Baton Rouge for some of the what looks like pretty extreme values for that area. And then tomorrow, with time, we're going to try to look at Macomb and Gulfport and maybe even get a few other areas thrown in there that do have some valuable data. Lakefront, Pascagoula, definitely. We'll see if we can get any more information from places like Houma or possibly Poplarville. See how far the data goes back for those, if it could be kind of reliable and worth us looking at. What we're going to look at so far mainly is just the summer. It's going to be focused kind of on that June, July, going into August. We're also going to look at the whole, from beginning of the year through the end of May, into June, into July. Some of the things we're going to really focus on are the mean average temperature for each month. And when I say mean average temperature, well, we have that morning low and the afternoon high. You take those two values, you add them together and divide by 2, and that gives you the mean or average temperature for that day. And then for the whole month, you just take those average temperatures, add them all together, and then divide by the number of days. And that will give you your mean average temperature for the month. People could get different values going through this all the time, because if you were just to add up all of the highs and lows for, say, let's just say June, which is 30 days, if you add up all those highs and lows, and then you would divide by 60, because that's 60 different values, that will give you a slightly different number than if you were to add up each day's high and low, divide each day by 2, and then add all 30 of those and divide by 2. Again, not by 2, sorry, add all 30 of those together and divide by 30. That gives you a slightly different number again. So depending on how you went through, or how some websites, whatever, go through the process of calculating the mean or average, you could be off, not off, but there could be slight differences between 0.1, 0.2, but they should be relatively close. When we talk about that maximum mean max temperature, we are only looking at the high temperature each day. So we'll take, say again, June, take all 30 days of June, add all 30 days of their afternoon highs, or the highest temperature recorded in that calendar day, add them all together and divide by 30, and that will give us our average max temperature. We'll look at some other monthly average summary temperatures and kind of where 2023 is standing, and then especially look at where 2023 is standing with respect to going all the way back to January 1st. And again, it's through the end of May, through the end of June, through the end of July. Can't really use August yet because we're only 10 days into August. So there is still quite a bit of August, and everyone knows what we're approaching the peak of. But fingers crossed that we remain quiet. We'll also take a quick look at some of the records, like daily high records, or what we call the high morning lows, or the high minimum values that occurred on each day, which is basically it's the lowest that the temperature actually got on that day, because we've had a number of days where that temperature remained rather warm and broke the record for the warmest low temperature of that day. And then lastly, we're going to do a quick update with the forecast over the next week. Here's a quick little hint. Expect more of the same. So first off, we're going to look at New Orleans International Airport. Looking at that right now for the month of June, you can see that maximum mean average temperature was 84.8 for June, which was the third warmest on record. The warmest on record was 85.1, which occurred last year. When we look at that mean max temperature of 93.7, that is the second warmest when just looking at the max temperatures. The warmest month for June was back in 2011, which had 94.1 for their mean max temperature. And then looking at the hottest day that occurred in June, we did get to 100 degrees on the 29th of June. As for the warmest low temperatures of June, we got to 80. We only dropped down to 81 degrees, and that occurred multiple times in the month, not just once or twice, but multiple times for June. So from a standpoint of record highs, we actually broke or tied 4 daily record highs. With those record warmest lows, we broke or tied 8 different days for the record warmest lows. And then again, we only hit 100 degrees one time in the month of June for New Orleans. So June, the top 10 June from a standpoint of the mean average temperature, as you can see, number 3 is where we stood at 84.8. Number 1 again, remember, was last year at 85.1, and 2011 was 85.0. As you can see, as you go down the list, you go all the way down to the 10th, which was 83.7. So you see right there, from number 1 to number 10, looking at the mean average temperature, it is only 1.4 degrees. That is typically what, records look like. Rarely do you get that one record that's just so far above or away from the rest of them. But for the top 10, there was only a 1.4 degree difference between those top 10. As we look at July, the mean average temperature for the month was 86.7, and that actually tied the warmest. It is tied with July of 2016. Again, both 86.7. When we look at the mean max temperature, just looking at those highs, July for New Orleans was the warmest July on record at 95.5, and the previous record was 94.9 in 1980. Kind of going right there, I mentioned earlier about how close those records were for the mean temperature in June. Well, if you look at that record for the max temperatures for July, that's 0.6 degrees already, so that's almost half of what the entire month was for the mean average temperature between 1 and 10, whereas between 1 and number 2 is more than half a degree. The hottest day that occurred in New Orleans in July was 101 on the 31st, and that also ties the all-time record high for the month of July. The warmest low that occurred in New Orleans was 82 degrees on the 13th. But the interesting thing is we actually broke less records, daily records, in July, even though we were warmer. And a lot of that really has to do with just that overall. I mean, those high temperatures, they were high, but they weren't extreme. We only hit 100 degrees one time in July for New Orleans. But we broke or tied record highs in New Orleans only twice for the month of July. And then we broke or tied record warm lows 4 times for the month of July. Looking at July's mean average temperature, as we mentioned earlier, this year tied with 2016 at 86.7. Then the number 3 was 85.8. So you look at that, between 1 and 2 right there, you've dropped down to 3. That's almost 1 degree. It's 0.9 degrees between 1 and 3rd. And I apologize because it should be 1 and no 2, but the program I'm working with right now, it wouldn't allow me to get rid of that. And then as you look down all the way to number 10 is 84.7. So between 3rd place and 10th place, you're looking at only 1.1 degrees. So that shows you how extreme 2016 and this year was for July. So some other little statistics for July. Not only did it tie with the warmest July on record, along with 2016, but this month was also the 2nd warmest overall month. So when you take every month, obviously it should beat out January, February, March, April. even May for that stand, because we still get pretty cold in the morning of May. And it should also beat out October, November, December's as well. But when you look at all of June's, all of July's, all of August, all of September's in the history of New Orleans, that was this past July and July of 2016 were the second warmest month, not just July, but second warmest month on record, with the record being 87.3, which occurred in August of 2011. The temperature, again, we mentioned earlier, the temperature of 101 that occurred on July 31st was the warmest day, the warmest July day on record. It is tied. It did not break it, so it is tied with the previous record. And then New Orleans broke the record also for the longest consecutive stretch of highs at or above 100 degrees. However, I would like to mention that this is in August. I just wanted to point this out just to show that it's only gotten kind of worse as we got into August. So we did have 3 straight days, August 5th through the August 7th, where the temperature got to 100 degrees or greater. The previous record was only 2 days, 2 consecutive days of 100 degrees or greater, and that occurred in 2010. I apologize again. The 5 warmest summers on record right now. So we're looking at June 1st through August 31st. So we can't use 2023 right now because obviously we got 20 plus days of records at least to include for August right now. But if you look at the top 5 right now, 2016 is the warmest summer on record at 85.6. And then you look at 2011, it's only 0.1 degree lower at 85.5. And you go to 5th place, which is 84.6, so 1 degree between 1st and 5th. And that was in 2010. Also, if you look at it, all of these top 5 warmest summers, 4 of those have occurred since 2010, with 1980, which was a pretty warm year, 84.9 for that summer. But if we include so far this year, 2023, through August 9th right now, we are currently sitting at 86.2 degrees, and as you can see, that is significantly warmer than those other 5. I mean, you're talking more than half a degree above number 1. So we still have 20 plus days left of August. If we want a chance of not breaking that record and not being the warmest summer at New Orleans, we really need to get some rain, because that's been kind of the other issue, is the lack of rain, which also means the lack of cloud cover, those outflow boundaries that help cool things off temporarily. And then even as humid as it's been, as rough as it's been with all the heat advisories and excessive heat warnings, that added moisture can also help from getting those 1 or 2 extra degrees that we're starting to get now due to the drier air, the drier soils really in place. It's still humid out there. There's no question about that. But when we lack that rainfall, it's allowing us to get that extra 1-2 degrees in the afternoon that we normally wouldn't get, and that adds up over time. So when you look at the moving mean average so far from January 1st through May 31st, that average temperature of 68.5 right now is ranked 3rd warmest for the first 5 months of the year. When you look at the first half of the year, our average temperature at New Orleans was 71.2, and that also ranks as the 3rd warmest. But as we have seen, July was really rough, and it's not gotten any better going into August. So when you look at the beginning of the year through July 31st, average temperature of 73.4 degrees, which is now ranked as the 2nd warmest first 7 months of the year. And we'll see if that continues. So that is for New Orleans. Now let's look at Baton Rouge, because some of these statistics really do get to be kind of interesting here. For June, that maximum mean average temperature of 84.5 was the warmest June on record. It beat the previous warmest June of 83.9 that occurred also last year, like New Orleans did. That maximum mean max temperature of 94.9 that occurred in June was actually the 2nd warmest month on record for June, just looking at those max temperatures. The warmest month, looks like it was tied. Warmest month was 94.9 in June of 2011. So why was it the warmest month on record, but tied right now for the warmest max? Well, because those morning lows are really what's kind of adding into Baton Rouge, and we'll get into that in a few little slides later about how bad these morning lows have really been for Baton Rouge. The hottest day to occur in June was a 101 that occurred on the 30th of June. And then Baton Rouge only dropped down to 81 degrees, which is really warm for a morning low in Baton Rouge. And that happened multiple times, not just once or twice, but multiple times in Baton Rouge. Record highs, though, so you look at that again, record highs that were broken or tied in June, 0. We did not break any records or tie any records for the maximum temperature any day in June. However, those record warmest lows, look at that, 7. We broke or tied 7 different days for the warmest low that day. The number of days where we hit 100 degrees or greater, only 1. We only hit 100 degrees or greater once in the month of June. And that will change as we move into July. So June 10th, the top 10 Junes. You look at that mean average temperature, 84.5 this year, pretty significantly above number 2, which was 83.9. So you're looking at 0.6 degrees above number 2. And you go all the way down to number 10, which is 82.7. You are sitting at 1.8 degrees above the 10th warmest month, which was 2018. As you can see with Baton Rouge's records, they do go quite a bit ways back. Due to, again, certain criteria have to be met, because we do have data for New Orleans that does go back into the 1800s, but there's some criteria that has to be met for the sites to be used together, or what we call threaded together. So if you're looking for some older history data for New Orleans, we would look at the Audubon Park, which does go back into the 1800s. And we could try to pull that up maybe tomorrow and see if there's any warmer months, but you're just looking at Baton Rouge right now. The only warmer months that really kind of come up, and you'll see, especially with July and into August, is going to be 1921 and 1914. Those are really the first two that kind of pop up, going back a little bit deeper in time. As we look at July, that mean average temperature for July was 87.8 degrees. That was a mean temperature of July. So you could expect those morning lows were rather warm most of the month. And those highs, they were pretty up there as well. But when you see the 87.8 as the hottest July on record, the July that it beat, 1960, had an 85.6. So it beat out number 2 by 2.2 degrees. That is a rather impressive beatdown on the second warmest July on record. That mean max temperature of 97.8 is also now the record for the max temperature, mean max temperature for July. The previous record was 96.4, so you can see it put a beat down on it as well. Also in July of 1960, beat it by 1.4 degrees. The hottest day that occurred in July was a 102, and that was on the 31st. The warmest low was 82 degrees that occurred on the 13th. 82 degrees for a morning low in Baton Rouge is ridiculous. And just to let you know, that got beat once as we move into August, and likely going to be beaten again today. The record high temperatures, we either broke or tied 8 different days record high temperature. As for the warmest lows, we either broke or tied 13 different days warmest low temperatures. So almost half of the month of July either tied or broke its warm low record. And then the number of times that we actually hit 100 degrees or greater in July was 5, with the last 3 days of July all hitting 100 degrees. Looking at that mean average temperature for July at 87.8, as we mentioned earlier, it beat number 2 by a whole 2.2 degrees, which was 85.6. But you go back to number 10, which is 84 degrees. Number 1 this year, 87.8, is almost 4 degrees warmer than the 10th highest July on record. And remember, Baton Rouge's record, because we can thread the data due to the previous site not being very far from which is now Ryan Airfield, BTR, because it was close enough that we could actually thread those two data streams together, these records go back to 1892. So you're looking at, over 120, actually 130 years, looks like 131 years of records at Baton Rouge. And number 1 is more than 2 degrees over number 2 and almost 4 degrees over number 10. So that just shows you how impressive July of 2023 has been. All right, so some tidbits, or really some interesting data on Baton Rouge right now. It did shatter, again, mentioned earlier, that warmest July on record of 87.8. That's that mean temperature. Beat the previous record of 85.6 that was set in 1960. Not only did it beat out July, but it beat out the hottest month that Baton Rouge has ever recorded on record, which was August 2011 at 86.3. Looking at those morning lows, which has really been the biggest case, Baton Rouge has had a morning low of 80 degrees or warmer. It had a total of 8 times in the month of July, which brought that now the 80 degrees or warmer. When you include July and June, it is now 12 times in the year of 2023. In the month of July, 3 of those days, the 2nd, 14th, and 21st, were 81 degrees. And then on the 13th, we reached 82 degrees. Now, we reached 82 degrees once in July. However, that completely changes as we get into August. So far for the year, 2023 has recorded the most frequent minimum temperatures of 80 degrees or greater in its history, breaking the old record of only occurring 4 times in 2019. And it's already occurred 12 times through July. So when I go to include August, the only days right now of August that did not stay above 80 degrees was August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So you look at the 4th through the 9th, and most likely today as well, the 4th through the 9th, we're looking at an additional 6 days. So that 12 now becomes 18 days where we've had a morning low of 80 or greater, and the previous record was 4. So again, heading into August, Baton Rouge broke its all-time record high minimum, that warm low. It occurred a couple days ago. The low only dropped to 83 degrees on August 8th. That beat the all-time record low of 82, which has occurred, as you've already seen mentioned, already this year. But it also occurred 3 other times in the month of August now. So you got those 3 and the one in July. So those 4, and 4 have occurred in the past 5 weeks. So that just shows you how warm it has been now. Even though that 83 degrees did break the record, with no rain right now and seeing no real reason for Baton Rouge to cool off that much tonight, this morning, the temperature only dropped to 85 degrees at Baton Rouge. 85 degrees, if you don't include the 83, it would beat the all-time record warm minimum by 3 degrees. It's even going to beat it by 2 degrees as long as it remains above 83 through basically 1 a.m. tonight. If the temperature does not drop below 85, then 85 will go down as the calendar day low for August 10th, and that will be the record warmest low for Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge also broke the record, a very long-standing record of consecutive stretch of highs at or above 100 degrees. The previous record was 8 days. It occurred in 1921, ending on August 26. However, the funny thing to mention about 1921 is that 8 days was the record. The third longest stretch is 6 days, which also occurred in August of 1921, and that was from August 4th through the 9th. Those days. So there was a stretch, a small week in there between a 6-day stretch and an 8-day stretch of 100 degrees. So those are 14 days of 100 degrees, but there was that week in between where it didn't kind of stayed below 100 degrees. The other thing to mention, though, is that August 3rd did not break 100 degrees. However, I believe the 1st and the 2nd did break 100 degrees. So again, those records could have been longer, which kind of goes to show you how impressive 1921 is. And this August is already starting to put a beat down on it. Right now, Baton Rouge did break that record for 10 days, 10 straight days of hitting 100 degrees or greater. Again, apologize for the error. That should be July 29th. Not sure why June's on there. Probably just typing and not paying attention on my part. But July 29th through August 7th, we hit 100 degrees or greater, 10 straight days. On the 8th, even though the funny thing is on the 8th, we had that record warm low of 83 degrees. We actually did only get to 99 because there was a lot of rain around that day. We actually had a good bit of showers and thunderstorm activity, and it kept the temperature from peaking out right at 100 degrees. That said, though, we hit 100 degrees yesterday on the 9th, and we hit 100 degrees so far today. So you take out that one day again, you've just continuing the stretch of 100 degrees. But because we only got to 99, it did break the consecutive streak for Baton Rouge. Okay, so real quickly, our weekly weather briefing for August 10th. Today, you've already kind of gone with us as we've talked about the warm temperatures across southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi so far for pretty much the entire summer so far. We're going to go over the forecast right now, and if you were paying attention kind of early on, I alluded to that forecast still looks to be rather hot and pretty miserable. So we'll go to our situation overview real quick. As you can see, the historic heat wave, it's expected to continue. Excessive heat warnings already out right now and likely to be extended through the weekend, maybe improving to heat advisory. I want to be careful improving the heat advisories because heat is a cumulative issue. It's still going to be hot. It's still going to be oppressive. It's still going to be miserable out there. And even if the heat index or the temperature is 98, 99 instead of 100 or 101, or that heat index is only 108 to 110 and not 113 to 116, your bodies have been dealing with the heat and it's just wearing on you, especially if you're one of the more vulnerable communities out there and you have a hard time finding areas to really cool off, or you work outside a lot. It's just these days just keep adding on. So I'd be very careful with the improving to heat advisories because it's still pretty oppressive out there and can be dangerous. Lower than normal rain chances expected to continue through the weekend. We need that rain for multiple reasons. One, to help cool us off, but we've seen the drought monitor has started to increase across the area. There is another drought update that's supposed to be released today. I have not seen it, so maybe we'll discuss that tomorrow, or in a tweet or a post we'll discuss what the update is on the drought monitor. There is some optimism, though, to a return to more summer-type shower thunderstorms by the middle of next week. However, those rainfall totals still look to be rather low, which will then allow us to continue to likely be above normal, if not well above normal. So the tropical weather outlook real quick. As you can see, let's hopefully keep this going. Nothing out in the tropics right now, even with the release today by NOAA of their update to the forecast of the hurricane season. When they did their update to the forecast, did increase the number of storms they're expecting. Right now, everything's quiet, but remember, first and foremost, it only takes one storm, and two, we are still approaching the peak of hurricane season. We are right now in that point where we start to see the hurricane activity, tropical activity ramp up. But we're only at the very beginning of that hill, and we are nowhere near the top of that hill yet. So current watches and warnings for the area. Well, we do have an excessive heat warning that does remain in effect through into the evening hours. The excessive heat watch that we had in place for tomorrow has been upgraded to a warning as well, and there is an excessive heat watch already issued for Saturday for the entire area. So as you can see, heading into the weekend, especially with many kids starting school yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's still going to be pretty hot out there and pretty miserable. And for any kids that catch that bus really like after 8 o'clock, the temperatures are already warming up pretty quickly, and likely with those warm morning lows, it's going to feel rough out there. I mean, you're probably going to see heat index values of well above 100 degrees by 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. The maximum temperature and the heat index forecast, this is through Saturday, just looking at the highest temperature and the highest heat index that we're forecast over the next 48 hours. As you can see, forecasting widespread upper 90s to even mid 100s. It's showing 102 right now for Baton Rouge. Looks like 102 into portions of southeastern Mississippi, well into 100, 102 across southwest Mississippi as well. But there's some areas where you don't see a point there that those values could be approaching 103 or 104. So getting pretty extreme values right now for those afternoon highs. And that's only going to add to that heat index, because even with the lack of rain, it's still humid. We still have a lot of low-level moisture. It's just the soil moisture isn't there. And that's going to continue to lead into heat indices easily of 110, probably approaching 125 in some areas. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have a few isolated areas that could peak out just below 130, especially like coastal Mississippi. A couple times you've been paying attention, Pascagoula, Gulfport, before the sea breeze it kicks in, before it really kind of surges to the north, they've warmed up significantly. They've warmed up sufficiently enough, and then you add that added moisture from the sea breeze, and there's not enough time for that temperature to respond and cool off a degree or two, and we're getting those heat indices of approaching 116 to below 120 before 11 o'clock noon. This is going to be the maximum temperature and heat index forecast for Sunday. We're forecasting for a high of 104 in Baton Rouge Sunday, and we're forecasting for, again, widespread 100 to 104, 105. I hope not 105 across most of the area, but you can see all of southeast Louisiana, from pretty much Houma to Slidell into the northwest. Looks like we're forecasting 100s. That does include most of the South Shore, all of the North Shore, but you can go coastal Mississippi. Gulfport has shown a forecast of 97, high probably at Pascagoula, about 98, 99. Just north of it, though, those are hundreds right now. It wouldn't surprise me if Pascagoula tops out at 100. It tends to like to do that because it's a little bit further inland, and if that sea breeze is just a little bit slower to try to penetrate north, you get that what we call compressional heating right out ahead of it, and it has allowed Pascagoula to kind of torch out in the past. So those extreme temperatures across coastal Mississippi, that added moisture, and of course all the really warm temperatures across southeast Louisiana as well, we see no rest for the weary. And you look at that maximum heat index forecast of 112 at Boothville, which is surrounded by water, but you can imagine how warm that water is right now in the Gulf of Mexico, or right offshore. We're looking at heat indices of 112 to easily topping out above 120 in some areas. The rainfall forecast over the next 7 days, we are showing rain, which is nice. That's great. And even half an inch to an inch. Look, beggars can't be choosers. Would like to see more, though. This rain, though, is likely not going to really occur, though, until sometime or early mid next week. Maybe a few little pop-up showers tomorrow through the weekend, but really looking at that rain chances to hopefully increase mid to late next week. This time of the year, normal rainfall, during the week, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches in a week time frame. And you look right there, hey, that, again, don't want to get upset about seeing, possible inch and a half of rain over the next 7 days. That's still below normal for what we see in a week. So looking at our day 3 to 7 hazard outlook, as you can see, Pretty much all of the southeast is under that hazardous heat, but it really kind of focuses in on of most of Texas, all of Louisiana, the southern half of Mississippi, across the Gulf Coast, including all of Florida as well. Again, schools are starting back up, so if you do have kids who catch the bus a little bit later in the morning, after the sun's already up and things are starting to get a little toasty, just make sure they have a little water with them in the morning. Be cognizant of any knowing the bus that your kids ride. If buses don't have an air conditioning, make sure your kid goes to school with a water bottle so they have something to drink during school, but also on the way home, because those buses can get awfully hot if they're not a working air condition. Outside of the 3 to 7 day, we're looking at our day 8 to 14 outlook, and it's not really good. You look at the temperature outlook, it looks like temperatures are going to be, we're expecting above normal temperatures still. Hopefully we can get out of that extreme oppressiveness. Maybe we can get a couple morning lows to really kind of drop down and kind of help recover a little bit, but it's not looking very favorable for us right now. And then looking at the rainfall outlook, it's gray over us, but you look just off to the north, there is a better chance of seeing below normal precipitation than there is seeing above normal. Right now, there's no indication that give them an idea of will we see below normal or above normal in that extended outlook. That's why we have that gray. So it's basically equal chances of either seeing above, below, or even near normal. And again, if that ridge that's kind of really giving us the heat is relaxing a little bit, we could possibly get those afternoon showers and thunderstorms, especially along the sea breeze. Don't really need to go too much into this. We talked about, especially at Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Want to point out, though, that every one of our ASOS sites, with the exception of Macomb, has recorded the warmest June 1st to August 9th on record. So far that summer, when we talked about earlier, June 1st to August 31st, but if you just include June 1st through August 9th, every site but Macomb is recording their warmest summer right now. Again, August, still 20 plus days. Let's get some rain going. Maybe we can get some slightly cooler morning lows, and we can cool down the summer a little bit. But at like Baton Rouge, you mentioned earlier, other sites, you're looking at 2 degrees above the second highest. Kind of keeping a close eye on that. We talked about Baton Rouge and New Orleans already, approaching or exceeding a full week of record warm overnight lows. Summary of impacts. While a few days of the higher rain chances are possible, the heat and the drought are going to continue, and that is the main story, and it is likely going to be a story for at least the next 2 weeks. Well, thanks again, everybody. I know this was very long. Hopefully that kind of look at some of the historical stuff and then the forecast was interesting. Everybody have a great day.